All right, we're going to move on in our adventures here. We're going to get section 96, as well as a plat for Zion, the actual planning of the city. So we have a lot of in between sections here. Forgive me as I blow through some of this, but we're going to start with the paper's introduction to section 96 itself, as we have it today, and as they had it back then. You'll see in a second. So the same day that we have the minutes from a conference discussing the French farm, the Peter French farm, they couldn't decide on what to do. They had all this land from Peter French in Kirtland, and they didn't know what to do. So they set that aside and said, we can't agree on what to do with this. However, what we do get is John Johnson is admitted into the United Firm and becomes a high priest. So congratulations. So that's all part of this. It's part of the minutes of a meeting again, which means there's a bunch of people collected together. Joseph has a revelation. They experience it. It's written down. And we get this. It's the earliest copy we find is in Revelation Book 2. It is the handwriting of Orson Hyde. And there's some very interesting corrections and replacement of code names here. So if you remember, we've talked about this before. Mostly these corrections, these code name additions, were done in the hand of Oliver Cowdery, which I find interesting. So the word Newell, right, Newell K. Whitney, his name is changed to Ahajda. Ahajda, maybe? I don't know. It's a made-up word. Firm is changed to My Order, and that's done twice. We don't call it the United Firm. We call it My Order or the United Order, and that's done twice in this revelation. John Johnson's name is changed to Zombre, which is awesome. Zombre. I wish that was my code name. Joseph's name is changed to Seth. Now, I'm talking about you are, and it says here, hey, John Johnson, you are a descendant of Joseph, like Joseph in Egypt, Joseph, Israel's son. And for some reason, this revelation is the only place we see this. Oliver Cowdery changes that to Seth. You're a descendant of Seth, the son of Adam. And it's not in any current scripture, so this is the only place you see that. I find that interesting. We also get this scrap of paper sort of jammed in here, which is in Oliver Cowdery's hand, which says this. It says, revelation given to Enoch, showing the order of the city or stake of Zion, Shaniha, or Shaniha, given for a sample to the saints in Kirtland, June 1833. And Enoch, if you remember, is the code word for Joseph Smith. And Shaniha, or Shaniha, however you want to say it, is the code word for Kirtland. Or you can call it maybe like a spiritual new name for that valley. But the word actually means son, according to the book of Abraham. So we get a couple of things here. And I'm getting this from Abraham chapter 3, verse 13, if you want to go look it up. So Shaneha equals sun. That's what that means. Olea is the moon. Kokab is star. And Kokabim, stars or all of the great lights. And so what Joseph Smith is doing here, and well, I shouldn't say Joseph Smith, but what Oliver Cowdery and other people are doing here, is they're actually using these words from the book of Abraham, in this case, the sun, to describe Kirtland. So kind of an interesting thing. Again, only happens here, which is cool. We got a copy in Revelation Book 1, in this, the handwriting of John Whitmer, and there are no corrections or code names used. So get like a truly clean copy. It just has everybody's names in it, which is cool. It is section 96 in the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. Mind blown. There it is again. We got two sections that match up to modern time, which is pretty cool. This one does contain the code words and the order substitutions. So if you read the original Doctrine and Covenants for this, you're going to see Enoch and Zombre, which I think is amazing. I love that name. And then we get into, and then the manuscript history also has the same thing, excuse me. So a couple of introductions here. The earliest copy simply says, Kirtland, June 4th, 1833. Nothing to it. Revelation Book 1, as per the usual, it just inserts the word revelation at the beginning. That's what you get. The Doctrine and Covenants, though, is very interesting. It says, a revelation to Enoch showing the order of the city or stake of Zion, Shaniha, given for a sample to the saints in Kirtland of June of 1833. So as you can see, Oliver Cowdery stuffed that little piece of paper in there, and it's the same thing as what the Doctrine and Covenants used as its introduction. So we get something more there. Manuscript history gives us this. On the 4th, a similar conference assembled at the same place and took into consideration how the French farm should be disposed of. The conference could not agree who should take charge of it, but all agreed to inquire of the Lord. Accordingly, we received the following revelation to Enoch, showing the order of the city or stake of Zion in Shineha, given for a sample to the saints in Kirtland, June 1833. So it kind of wraps it all together. And I should say, like, if you ever read, it's we now call it the history of the church, but the manuscript history is really great at consolidating a lot of what's going on. So I will have to hand it to Howard Corey and everybody who was involved in that. They did a very, very good job putting together a pretty legitimate history that we used for many, many years. So, all right. We get a very small change in the current section headings. So the 1981 section heading says, given as an example to the saints in Kirtland, whereas 2013 just says, as an example. Whatever. So that's the only thing you get. Given is taken away. That's the major change that we get there from then to now. So a little bit more from the historical introduction. It's actually very short, so I'm just going to read the whole thing. This is from the editors of the Joseph Smith Papers. On the 4th of June, 1833, a meeting of high priests assembled in the translating room at Newell K. Whitney's store in Kirtland, Ohio, to discuss the use and management of the recently acquired Peter French farm. Unable to arrive at a consensus as to who should manage the French property, the high priests agreed to inquire of the Lord about the issue. Joseph Smith subsequently dictated the following revelation during the meeting. The minutes of the 4th June conference indicate that church leaders took immediate action on the instructions given in the revelation. That same day, they formally assigned Newell K. Whitney to manage the French farm and admitted John Johnson to the united firm. We've read about all of that. So let's get into the content and footnotes of this. The French farm was left undecided, so we get this from the revelation itself. It says, therefore, let my servant Newell take charge of the place which is named among you, upon which I design to build mine holy house. So Revelation says, Newell K. Whitney, you're the dude, bro. And then it says this, out of footnote 3, it says, the lot specified for the holy house was located on the southeastern corner of the French farm. So if you ever visit the Kirtland Temple, you're standing on the southeastern corner of the original French farm plot, which is kind of fun. So the French farm is a big deal. Peter French Farm, this is where a lot of very major early things happened. So that's why I think it's apropos that we have a lot of revelations sort of talking about this. Further into the text we get, therefore take heed that ye see to this matter, and that portion that is necessary to benefit the firm for the purpose of bringing forth my word to the children of men. So another use of the French farm. We get this from footnote 5. It says, the firm refers to the united firm. A subset of the united firm, the literary firm, was responsible for publishing the revelations. Quote, that portion to be devoted to bring forth God's word may refer either to acreage allotted for building a print shop or to land sale proceeds that could be used to support such a printing operation. Although a later revelation called for the construction of a printing house on land belonging to Frederick G. Williams, the print shop was eventually housed in the schoolhouse built not on Williams' land to the south of the temple, but to the west on the former French farm property. So a subset of the united firm was called the literary firm. And I would argue today we kind of have that. We have intellectual property, which is the thing that prints our books. We have, I think it's called, intellectual reserve. Call it intellectual reserve. That's all of this sort of publications of the church. We have property reserve. That's all the real estate of the church. These are all sort of underneath the main body of the church and how they run their business. All right, so we also get a reference to the meeting that we just had. So it says in the Revelation, and again, verily I say unto you, it is wisdom and expedient in me that my servant John Johnson, whose offering I have accepted and whose prayers I have heard, unto whom I give a promise of eternal life, inasmuch as he keepeth my commandments from henceforth, for he is a descendant of Joseph, and a partaker of the blessings of the promise made unto his fathers. Verily I say unto you, it is expedient in me that he should become a member of the firm, that he may assist in bringing forth my word unto the children of men. Therefore ye shall ordain him unto this blessing. And as you remember, the earliest copy we have, Oliver Cowdery apparently said he's a descendant of Seth instead of Joseph, but we don't see that anywhere else. It's just that one place. All right, so that's the end of that. We now get into a lot of stuff to talk about. So first thing we get is a meeting on the 6th of June to talk about building the house of the Lord, and the temple committee, which is Hiram and Reynolds and Jarrett, are to start building it and then obtain, they need to get stone and brick and lumber and all that kind of stuff. That's that meeting. Then a couple of weeks go by. 24th of June is an appeal from Dr. Phalastus Hurlbut, which says, and I love this, it's very interesting. There's some drama here. It says, I, Dr. Phalastus Hurlbut, having been tried before the Bishop's Council of High Priests in a charge of unchristian-like conduct with the female sex, and myself being absent at the time and considering that strict justice was not done me, I do by these presents most solemnly enter my appeal unto the President's Council of High Priests for a rehearing according to the privilege guaranteed to me in the laws of the church. So this is him saying, well, you guys passed down some judgment, but I want to appeal it, and I have that right. And then we get the meeting for this case, and the testimony is given. The judgment was this from the meeting. I'll just skip to the part where what did they actually decide? It says, quote, this council decided that the Bishop's Council decided correctly before, and that Brother H's crime was sufficient to cut him off from the church. But on his confession, he was restored. And that's signed by Joseph Smith. So they say, hey, you did your thing, you messed up, and now you are excommunicated, but we're going to restore you because you were super honest. All right. That same day, we get a few meeting notes. So this is, I'll just read it to you. It says, June 21st, 1833, Brother Daniel Copley's priest license and membership were taken from him by the President's court because he refused to fulfill his mission according to the counsel of the High Priesthood of the Holy Order of God. So this guy, Daniel Copley, Lehman Copley was his father. He was about 21, goes on a mission, came home too early. Now, I'll just mention this, even though I don't know if it's really worth getting into, but later on, reminiscent accounts said that he was too weak and that he shouldn't have even been a member of the church, and I feel like that's a little harsh. So those were just sort of personal opinions later on, contemporary personal opinions, but he didn't fulfill his mission, so he came home early. And his priest license was revoked, which basically means you're not going to be preaching anymore out there. But I believe he retained his position as a member. Anyway, the 23rd of June has a meeting, and it says this. So here's the drama part. Brother D.P. Hurlbut's, or Dr. Phalastus Hurlbut, case was called in question this day before a general council, and upon the testimony of Brother Gee of Thompson, who testified that Brother D.P.H. said that he had deceived Joseph Smith's God, or the spirit by which he is actuated, etc., etc. The council proceeded to cut him off from the church. There was also corroborating testimony brought against him by Brother Hodges. So I guess those good feelings lasted about 2 days. So Dr. Hurlbut apparently did a thing, lied about it. There were some people who corroborated his story. He was immediately excommunicated. And Dr. Hurlbut, that's his first name again, Mr. Hurlbut, became a very staunch enemy of the church after this, after he got busted here. Most of the negative evidence that you actually have, in fact, most of the content that you get from Mormonism Unveiled actually comes from Mr. Hurlbut. So he got busted, and then he went all over to gather all the negative stuff that he could, and he worked with Eber Howe to write Mormonism Unveiled. And in a way, we're grateful because there's a lot of historical good stuff that comes out of that. So thanks, Doctor. The next thing we get is a very interesting one. This is a gem, one of my favorite gems from the Joseph Smith papers. It is the Plat of the City of Zion. This was made about the 25th of June, 1833. And this is one of the main inspirations for me doing filling in history. So I really hope you enjoy this. I hope I don't blow this. It is in the handwriting of Frederick G. Williams. It is a paper that's 16 and a half inches by 12 and 3/4 inches. It's pretty big. It's drawn in ink, and then it's also watercolored. And we're going to get into that little gem in a moment. So let's talk about the contents of this thing. I'm going to do the historical introduction afterwards. Lots of plots here. And then in the center, you'll see these 3 colored blocks with numbers inside the middle one and the one on the right. So the two, the center and right ones there. There's text all around the borders of the plat. So you have the drawing in the middle, and then they've written some text around the outside. So here's some items from that text, and further explanations will follow, I promise. It says here, the painted squares in the middle are for public buildings. The one without any figure is for storehouses for the bishop, to be devoted to his use. Figure 1 is for temples, for the use of the presidency. The circles inside of the square are the places for the temples. You will see it contains 12 figures. 2 is for the temples for the lesser priesthood. It also is to contain 12 temples. The whole square, or plot, is supposed to contain from 15 to 20,000 people. You will therefore see that it will require 24 buildings to supply them with houses to worship, schools, and none of these temples are to be smaller than the one of which we sent you the draft. This temple is to be built in square number marked figure 1, and to be built where the circle is which has a cross on it. So literally the X marks the spot for this. Now I'm going to get into this in a moment. I just wanted you to hear it. So if you heard it in there, just to reiterate this, it's talking about containing multiple temples. I know today we have a Kirtland temple, we have one, but there were supposed to be multiples. So how are they supposed to live in this whole thing? It says here from the document, on the north and south of the plot where the line is drawn is to be laid off for barns, stables, etc., for the use of the city, so that no barns or stables will be in the city, among the houses. The ground to be occupied for these must be laid off according to wisdom. On the north and south are to be laid off the farms for the agricultural, a sufficient quantity of land to supply the whole plot, and if it cannot be laid off without going too great a distance from the city, there must also be laid off on the east and west where this square is, thus laid off, and supplied lay off another in the same way, and so fill up the world in these last days, and let every man live in the city, or this is the city of Zion. So basically, they're going to just, so you have where you live on the inside, and then you have some ground on the outside of it, and then you're supposed to build another one and put ground on the outside of that, and apparently just build the entire earth this way. Talk about ambitious. There's not even 100,000 people that are members of the church yet. Anyway, so how many people could you in a temple back then, right? It's talking about tens and 20,000 people. Well, footnote 9 for this says this. For the entire projected population of at least 15,000 people to attend church at one time, 625 people would have to fit into each of the 24 temples. This figure, more or less, matches the seating capacity according to the specifications of the plans of the House of the Lord sent to Missouri with this plat. Built according to plan and calculating one person per 18 inches, the pews, choir seats, and pulpit seats together would hold approximately 696 people per temple. So this was meant for a lot of people, about 700 people per temple. As long as you're 18 inches wide. I don't know if I'm 18 inches wide or not, but that's how much space you get. All right, historical introduction behind this. I'm hoping this explains some of this to you. It says, the plat is drawn with the east-oriented side at the top. So what you're looking at here, the top part of it, is not north, that is east. It displays a 1 square mile grid with 49 city blocks and 132-foot wide straight streets crossing at right angles. The square mile grid pattern adhered to guidelines set out in the Federal Land Ordinance of 1785 and was common in urban planning during this period of American history. So this is not entirely unique. And what's funny is now it's associated with Latter-day Saints because we built Salt Lake City this way, and Provo and Springfield, and all these towns are laid out in this sort of square grid by the compass sort of thing. Footnote 6 to the introduction says this. According to historical geographer Richard H. Jackson, Philadelphia was an early example of a planned city that incorporated some of the same features as the plan for the city of Zion. Jackson also demonstrates that the plan for Zion, particularly its street width, is similar to the layout of several towns in Ohio, with which Joseph Smith was likely familiar. So again, nothing new. In fact, Philadelphia might have been one of the first to try this, which I thought was very interesting. However, your math doesn't really add up. So we get this from the historical introduction. The instructions stated that each house should be set back 25 feet from the street and be made of brick and stone. The explanation also indicated that the city was intended to accommodate 15 to 20,000 people. However, the plat features only 976 residential lots, which means that more than 15 individuals would have needed to live in each house in order to accommodate a minimum of 15,000 people. 15 people in a house. So I guess have babies, or I'm not sure where they were going with that. So I don't know, maybe it's a 2-story home, but yeah, that was a lot of people per home. So how do people live and farm and work here? Well, we get this. The Plat and its explanation depicted an urban agrarian center designed for equitable distribution of property, community cohesion, and convenient access to schoolhouses, places of congregational worship, and nearby agricultural land that was to support the urban population. The explanation of the Plat indicated that all individuals living in the city of Zion were to reside in the urban center even if they worked on a farm. The presidency explained that all farms, grazing areas, and agricultural structures were to be built outside the city's perimeter, forming a hinterland and green belt. The Plat did not indicate where businesses were to be built, suggesting they might also be located outside of the city, or perhaps they were to be connected to residential lots or located on one of the central blocks within the storehouses. So basically, of the 3 squares, the blank one on the left might have been for businesses as well. We don't know. We don't know. All right, so here's the main event, the religious center of Zion. We get this from the historical introduction. The 3 larger blocks in the center of the Plat contained a complex of 24 multi-purpose buildings, or houses of the Lord, which were to dominate the urban landscape. The presence of these buildings and the apparent exclusion of other types of buildings highlights the role of religion in the city. Though these houses or temples may have been intended to serve as locations where people could perform the municipal functions of law and order, the names given in the explanation of the city plat for these 24 buildings reflect the priesthood structure of the church. This sacred space was the city's focal point. Much of daily life was meant to revolve around these buildings, which would likely be used for church administration, ecclesiastical worship, and priesthood education. 2 years earlier, during a visit to Jackson County in summer of 1831, Joseph Smith and 7 other church leaders had, quote, assembled together where the temple is to be erected. Sidney Rigdon dedicated the ground for the city, and Joseph Smith laid a cornerstone for the contemplated temple on the 3rd of August, 1831. Rigdon then pronounced this spot of ground wholly dedicated unto the Lord forever. The Plat may have been designed with that spot of ground as its center. So if you didn't hear that, they were originally considering building 24 temples in the center of town. That never came to pass, but that was the original very ambitious goal that they had. Now, X marks the spot, as we talked about before, from the historical introduction. Along with this plat, an architectural plan for the first house of the Lord to be built in Zion accompanied the letter to church leaders in Jackson County. That plan also gave specifications, dimensions, and names for the 24 temples to be constructed in the city center. The Kirtland leaders wrote that they desired, quote, with all our hearts the prosperity of Zion and the peace of her inhabitants, for we have as great an interest in the welfare of Zion, unquote. For this reason, they sent the plat, explanations, and plans. They instructed that the temple identified on the plat by an X was to be built immediately in Zion for the presidency as well as all purposes of religion and instruction, much like the multi-purpose structure then being built in Kirtland, underscoring the importance of the plans and explanations sent. Joseph Smith and the Kirtland leadership informed the recipients in Missouri that if they did not understand the explanations for the house or the plat, quote, you will inform us so as you may have a proper understanding, for it is meet that all things should be done according to the pattern, unquote. The explanations on the borders of this plat are also found in Letterbook 1. So all this kind of like going around it, this is all kind of copied and put in Letterbook 1. So again, take what you see as the Kirtland Temple, multiply it by 24, but the one that they sent, the specific Kirtland Temple one, was supposed to be the X marks the spot right in the center of town. So there was an order to these things. We'll get to that in a second, which is kind of fun. This document caused some major feelings, though. So, although this plat had not yet reached Jackson County, opponents of the church claimed to have heard church members declare openly that their God has given them this country of land, and that sooner or later they must and will have possession of our lands for an inheritance. Such sentiments angered many local residents and further motivated them to expel the Mormons. The plat of the city of Zion, had it been seen by the church's opponents, could have confirmed what they already believed about the Church of Christ's goals in the county. By the time this plat was received in Missouri, church members were already embroiled in a growing civil conflict with other residents of Jackson County, and therefore could not implement the plans. Based on letters from Missouri and noticeable defects in the plan, Frederick G. Williams, again on behalf of the presidency of the high priesthood, drew a revised plat map for the city of Zion and sent it to Missouri about 2 months later. So the fighting words and the origins of the major issues of the saints being driven out over and over again is the idea is, hey, we're going to move in, we're going to buy you guys out, and we're going to take this whole thing over for ourselves. So again, I think an understandable, beginning of a conflict, but these plans hadn't even arrived yet. So, but I love the implication here. If they would have seen them, they would have been really upset. So yeah, there you go. Now let's flip this page over. There's some things here as well. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but it does give the names of these temples. They were going to have names for themselves. So basically what it says is, hey, squares, and then it gives numbers, and then it gives squares, all this whatever, and then it gives the name of the temple. That's what we're going to do today. So they are to be called the house of the Lord for the presidency of the high and most holy priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, which was after the order of the Son of God, upon Mount Zion, city of the New Jerusalem. That's a very long name. Next, we get the Sacred Apostolical Repository for the use of the bishops. After that, the Holy Evangelical House for the High Priesthood of the Holy Order of God. After that, the House of the Lord for the Elders of Zion and Ensign to the Nations. Then we get House of the Lord for the Presidency of the High Priesthood after the Order of Aaron, the standard for the people. Then we get House of the Lord, the Law of the Kingdom of Heaven, and Messenger to the people for the priesthood, high priesthood after the order of Aaron. After that, House of the Lord for the teachers in Zion. After that, House of the Lord for the deacons in Zion. And it says underneath must be written on each house, holiness to the Lord. And then it says this, the stars are to have the sentences placed together, having committed an error in writing the sentence. For the high priesthood after the order of Aaron should be placed immediately after the house of the Lord. Anyway, the naming is a little strange, but that's what we get. Footnote 26 to this says, the high priesthood after the order of Aaron seems contrary to the high priesthood, which was after the order of Melchizedek. So that was understood to be the church at this time. This designation probably refers to the bishopric who preside in the lesser or Aaronic priesthood. So sort of the highest office in the Aaronic priesthood. So basically you get a building for bishops, priests, teachers, deacons. You get some for the apostles. You get some for the first presidency. They all have their own little thing. And if this kind of sounds familiar, we're going to get to that in a second as well. But before that, footnote 30 connects the temples with famous pulpits. Ready for this? It says, like the 24 temples listed here, the two sets of tiered pulpits that were to be built in the house of the Lord were labeled according to priesthood office, as shown on the temple plans sent to Missouri in June of 1833. At one end, 4 tiers of pulpits, each with 3 seats, were to be built for, in ascending order, the deacons, teachers, priests, and the presidency of the lesser priesthood. So, teachers, deacons, priests, and then the bishopric. Those were the tiers of those pulpits. At the other end, 4 tiers of pulpits were for, in ascending order, elders, high priests, bishops, and presidency of the high priesthood. The temple numbering in this paragraph shows the same pattern. The first 3 temples listed were for elders, the next 3 for high priests, the third cluster for the bishops, with the highest numbers in the temple block for the presidency of the high priesthood. In the second block, the numbered temples were also assigned to ascending order for the deacons, teachers, priests, and the presidency of the lesser priesthood. And you see this, by the way, if you look at any temple with like 3 spires on either side, so you have like Salt Lake is like this. These 3 spires are for the Aaronic priesthood, and these taller spires are for the Melchizedek priesthood. And in the upper room, that's how they built that as well. So there's this pattern of like kind of these 2 supporting and being opposite of each other. So let's get into the pulpits themselves. So what do these all mean? On the front of these pulpits, and this was the pattern going to be used for building entire houses to worship in. I just wanted to explain this. I might get into this a little later when we get into sections 109 and 110, but just for now, just because it's kind of fun. See if you can see a pattern here. So on the pulpits, you see PEQ, which is presidency of the elders quorum, right? Presidency of EQ, elders quorum. PHPQ, which is presidency of high priest quorum. Then you get presidents of 70, PSZ. Perhaps Z was meant to be a Q for quorum, but anyway. PMPH, presidency of Melchizedek high priest, right? And then if you go to the other side, you see PDQ, president deacons quorum, PTQ, teachers quorum, PPQ, priest quorum, and PAP, presidency of Aaronic priesthood. And that, my friends, is a lot of detail, but that is one of my gems from the Joseph Smith papers. I had no idea when I first read these things that when they built the city, they were going to build temples, individual houses of the Lord that matched the pulpits. And that's how they were supposed to work. The deacons would go here, and the teachers and the priests, and they would all be taught, and they would be public buildings. They would do law and order there, all sorts of stuff. Really amazing. So that might have been a lot of detail, but I got it off my chest. Go take a look at it if you want. As we move on into our next sections, our next parts here, we're going to get into a little bit of persecution going on in Independence, Missouri, as well as more sections of the Doctrine and Covenants. So stick with us.